Now call to order the hearing on the United States Capitol Police. This is a hybrid hearing.
Recording in progress.
Recording is in progress. This is a hybrid hearing, so we need to address a few housekeeping matters. So if you can bear with me for a minute. For members joining virtually, please be respectful of members in the hearing room and do not talk over them when members in person have been recognized. For the members joining virtually, once you start speaking, there is a slight delay before you're displayed on the main screen. Speaking into the microphone activates the camera, displaying the speaker on the main screen. Do not stop your remarks if you do not immediately see the screen switch. If the screen does not change after several seconds, please make sure you are not muted. To minimize background noise and ensure the correct speaker is being displayed, we ask that you remain on mute unless you have sought recognition. The chair or an individual designated by the chair may mute participants' microphones when they are not under recognition to eliminate inadvertent background noise. Members who are virtual are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves. If I notice when you are recognized that you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask you if you would like the staff to unmute you. If you indicate approval by nodding, staff will unmute your microphone. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. Okay, so let's begin. Chief Manger, very happy to see you. Thank you for being here. Chief Administrative Officer Richard Braddock, members of the Capitol Police Executive Team, Thomas Tobias, U.S. Capitol Police General Counsel, and the FOP Chairman Gus Papathanassiou. Not bad. That's not bad. Thank you for being here. We appreciate all the work you guys are doing together with the management and labor to make this whole operation work. I want to thank each of you and all the officers and civilians at the Capitol Police who work tirelessly to ensure the safety and security of the members, employees, visitors, and facilities, both here and within our districts. The Capitol Police have a very unique role as the only law enforcement agency solely responsible for protecting the Congress and the U.S. Capitol complex. I repeat this at each of our hearings to emphasize the essential role the Capitol Police plays as an agency of the legislative branch. The men and women of the Capitol Police put their lives on the line each day to ensure Congress can operate efficiently and carry out their roles as described in the Constitution. You do your jobs so that we can do ours. Thank you for joining us this morning to discuss the Department's fiscal year 2023 budget request. Currently, resources for the Capitol Police are 10% of the entire legislative branch budget, totaling $602.5 million. Today, you will be requesting $708 million, a significant increase above what was already provided in supplemental funding and the fiscal year budget. This is an increase of $105.5 million over the fiscal year 2022 enacted totals. Safety, security, and wellness remain this subcommittee's top priorities. I don't need to tell you that the threats to members in the Capitol complex are significantly on the rise. As stated in your request, increases in the numbers of threats and directions of interest towards members of Congress have increased tenfold in the past 5 years. In 1 year, from 2020 to 2021, these threats and directions of interest toward members increased almost 12%, reaching as high as 9,625 threats. On January 6th, we witnessed how these threats turn into action. Today, Chief, I hope you will address how your budget request of an additional $105 million reflects the Capitol Police's response to the many security recommendations that have been made since the attack, and how more resources will positively impact the security planning, policies, and procedures that were lacking on that day. The continuous rise in threats makes it clear that increases and improvements are needed. but we on this committee need to understand in detail how any increases provided will be used to increase our security posture and keep us, our staffs, and visitors safe. As the Capitol campus begins to reopen to the American public, we need to understand the plan for this year, next year, and the future. We need to know how your request will enhance security, be regularized, and make us all safe. I look forward to your testimony today. At this point, I'd like to yield to our ranking member, my friend and colleague from Washington State, Ms. Herrera Butler, for any opening comments she would like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chief, for being here. Welcome to your first hearing, hopefully first of many. As was stated, the United States Capitol Police Fiscal 23 request is about a 17.52% increase over last year. I don't need to go into all those numbers. We talked about this a little bit as well. And for those who are not aware, I know the folks in this room are, but those who may be watching, the Capitol Police serve to protect this Capitol, the People's House, and it's the epicenter and a beacon in terms of democracy. And yes, it is an increasingly partisan political landscape. It's probably not more partisan than it has been at times in the past. I really think that everything together, including frustrations from a global pandemic, has brought to a boil feelings and emotions here that probably, I think everybody, the stress of it, everyone is feeling. Only your members, your staff, have to do a job to keep people safe in the middle of all of that and allow it to still function. The daily service and the sacrifices of the Capitol Police, the men and women who wear that uniform, I think are amazing. They give it to protect a historic not a monument, but a living, breathing example of what our country is. And it's here in the heartbeat of democracy. So we're really, really grateful to you. And we're grateful to the men and women who continue to come in every day. Over the last year, the department, the leadership, and the policies of the department have been justifiably scrutinized through numerous reviews stemming from the January 6th insurrection. Those include Capitol Police by the Inspector General, the architect of the Capitol Inspector General, the GAO, Government Accountability Office, third-party assessments, and numerous congressional reviews, including by this committee, that have offered substantial recommendations in the needed evolution of the operations of your department. In fact, we installed a new chief. In addition to those, the enhancements to your intelligence and investigative capabilities, to enhance training, developing better resources, management methods, and advancement to the department's overall culture are still a work in progress. You're building on it, but it still is going to grow. As the Capitol Police expand its reach across the nation, investigating threats aggressively, we talked about this. I'm just going to repeat it because I think people need to know. We went from, 1,000 to maybe 1,500 threats about 5 or 6 years ago to members of Congress to almost 10,000 in a year. That's today's numbers. And that's what you're tasked with trying to help manage. All this while you're trying to rebuild your force here in D.C. And increasing your capabilities and your resources. Right now really is the perfect time to implement a lot of the recommendations that have been from these ongoing assessments. So these recommendations and the best practices, I think, should be the foundation to the advancement of the department and how its human and technical and physical resources function. That's my view. As various recommendations are implemented, and I know you're doing that. Changes are made to the way that the department operates. It's important that there be an increased transparency and accountability because people are going to need to see how this is happening. This department's first budget request, this is the first budget request since January 6th, and it takes into account the resources Congress provided in the security supplemental last year and now must be accounted to your overall funding. I believe the subcommittee recognized we would see an increase in your budget request this year, but you are asking for over $100 million increase, and increase that significant obviously needs to be thoughtfully considered in view of the public. And I look forward to hearing more about the resources that Capitol Police need and are requesting today and through this hearing. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrer-Butler, for being a great partner in all this over the last couple of years, so we appreciate your leadership. Chair of the full committee, Ms. DeLauro.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Ryan, and to Ranking Member Herrera-Butler. This is an incredibly important hearing, and I want to say a thank you to Chief Manger for testifying here this morning. It has been just a little over a year since a mob of violent insurrectionists stormed the Capitol. Their intent was on stopping the peaceful transfer of power. A horrifying day for many of us, but even more so horrifying for the women and men of the U.S. Capitol Police. Many of them risked their lives defending us and our democracy, and 4 officers ultimately lost their lives. Others suffered serious injuries, while still more are continuing to suffer from the psychological traumas that they endured. As these officers recover from that day and return to post-COVID operations, which include opening the campus to visitors, it is critical that we ensure the force is sufficiently equipped to meet existing security needs and that we fully support the Capitol Police. The Capitol Police are dealing with more threats, as has just been mentioned by a ranking member, that almost 10,000 threats against members these threats are becoming more sophisticated and are involving individual actors as well as domestic terrorist groups. The Capitol Police continue to be called upon to protect the Congress, not only here in D.C., but also in our districts. This means the Capitol Police of yesterday is no longer sufficient to meet the challenges of today or tomorrow, and it is our responsibility to help equip them to meet those increased challenges. That is why I am proud that we were able to include an increase of $87 million for the Capitol Police in the fiscal year 2022 government funding package. That funding will support more than 2,000 officers, over 450 civilian members of the Capitol Police Force. This funding also included several significant measures to help bring more transparency, diversity, leadership training, and to standardize vetting of individuals who seek employment with the Capitol Police. It has been said, but it is worth saying over and over again. You protect us every single day. You put your lives on the line every single day. That has implications for the police force, but there's implications for your families as well, and their concern about what happens to the men and women that they love, and are they being safe? We recognize, and we need to recognize for those who don't, what a tough job this is. And what we need to do is to respect the work of the Capitol Police, and that we must provide the resources that are necessary for you to do your job to protect us. We need to protect you. And I would probably go so far as saying is that these days there is a low morale problem with law enforcement agencies, Capitol Police, police departments around the country. We need to let you know, and our law enforcement agencies around the nation, that we are here to fund the police and to make sure that you have what you need to get the job done. And so we know that how we want to, there are new challenges, and therefore we need to do more. As I said, we need to honor the sacrifices, but we need more funding for staffing, providing for hazard and retention bonuses, increased overtime pay, student loan repayment, and most importantly, a better work-life balance. It means providing for the mental health that the chair spoke about so that the officers of the Capitol Police remain resilient and committed to the indispensable role they play, while also ensuring they feel respected and valued in the critical work that they do to secure the United States Congress. With that, let me yield back, and I thank you so much, Chief, for being here, and look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Ms. DeLauro. agree with you 1,000% on what you said. We're seeing these issues all over the country of people not having difficulty filling spots in departments all over the country. So, Chief, at the beginning of your testimony, please introduce any colleagues that you have here joining you with your presentation, and without objection, your written testimony will be made part of the record. Please summarize your statements for the members of the committee, and once you finish your statement, we will move to the question and answer period. Thank you again for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Ryan. Thank you, Chairwoman DeLauro. Thank you, Ranking Member Herrera Butler, and the members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to present the United States Capitol Police budget for FY23. And Chairman Ryan, thank you for acknowledging the several members of my staff that were here. Also with us is Assistant Chief Sean Gallagher. And as you mentioned, we have the CAO, my general counsel, and the chairman of the FOP, who I'm very pleased is here as well.
You need to say his last name for us. Just
Gus Papathanassiou.
Excellent.
That's
There
my
you
first
go.
question. I answered it good. But I told him it's like Cher. He can just go by Gus. Everybody knows Gus. As this committee knows very well, our mission is complex, relentless, and unique in federal law enforcement. As has been said by several members of this committee, we're responsible for the protection of the United States Capitol, the most notable symbol of democracy around the world. This FY23 budget request allows the United States Capitol Police to keep pace with the evolving challenges, the additional responsibilities, and increasing service demands that we face. From the dramatic increase in threats against members of Congress to increased staffing needs, recruitment and training demands, all of the United States Capitol Police organizational elements are being tested to keep up with this increased workload. Following the events of January 6th, the Congress appropriated over $106 million in emergency supplemental funding. These funds were not only intended to provide desperately needed support for the department, but to also address deficiencies and lay the foundation for which the USCP could begin to transform from a primarily policing organization into a protective agency. The emergency supplemental appropriation went toward the procurement of much-needed safety equipment, to include state-of-the-art civil disturbance response equipment and reimbursement for critical state and local law enforcement assistance in meeting the department's mission across the country. It also provided the establishment of reimbursable mutual aid agreements with local and state and federal law enforcement partners to ensure that the Capitol Police has the capacity to respond to critical incidents within the Capitol complex. This authority has proved to be very valuable and has been utilized on several occasions so that the congressional community remained safe and could proceed with its business uninterrupted. The department's FY23 budget request serves as a midpoint in this transformation process. In developing the FY23 budget request, we considered the previous funding for various programmatic activities, with the understanding that the Inspector General's investigations into the challenges and failures leading up to January 6th remain ongoing and may lead to future resource requirement needs. The IG has submitted numerous flash reports, which include findings on policy, training, deployment, leadership, and staffing gaps that affected the department's preparedness and response to the events of January 6th. Additionally, select recommendations from General Honore's report commissioned by the United States House of Representatives were also reviewed and factored into the formulation of our budget request. In fact, as has been pointed out, this is the first budget that has been prepared since the IG reports have been completed, and many, if not most, of the requests that you will see in our FY23 budget submission are tied directly to the Inspector General's recommendations. The FY23 USCP budget request, therefore, is over $708 million, which is an increase of 17.5% over the FY22 enacted levels. This includes budgetary authority and resources to fund 2,126 sworn officers and 567 civilian positions. Specifically, this request is focused on 9 areas that are critical to transform the department into a stronger protective agency. The 9 areas of focus are: first, the normalization of staffing levels for post-COVID and post-January 6th environment. Our staffing levels pre-pandemic and pre-January 6th are frankly now inadequate and unsustainable in our ability to fulfill our mission moving forward. Number 2, enhancing the department's intelligence capabilities. 3, expanding dignitary protection capabilities. 4th, expanding the capabilities to address threats, directions of interest toward members, to enhance our cybersecurity, and to be able to do additional criminal investigations. 5th, expanding physical and technical security capabilities in support of securing the Capitol complex. 6th, enhancing major event planning and command and control and coordination. 7th, enhancing response and special operations capabilities. 8th, re-engineering training capabilities to meet the recruit training, in-service training, physical skills, professional development, and leadership training. 9th, enhancing the support operations infrastructure in order to execute mission-oriented transformational activities. Additionally, in this budget, the department is seeking to fund the continued development and implementation of additional wellness and resiliency resources for our workforce. And lastly, the FY23 budget request includes the costs associated with the utilization of contracted security guards to address secondary security posts. This will allow our officers to be realigned to meet critical frontline security requirements while additional full-time SWORD personnel are recruited, hired, and trained. Mr. Chairman, the events of January 6th exposed critical deficiencies with the operational planning, intelligence, staffing, training, and equipment. I recognize those issues have to be addressed, and that is the basis for our FY23 request. My leadership team and I are focused on the transformational change needed to make the improvements in these areas both now and into the future. We thank the subcommittee for its support and guidance during this process and for its support with both the Emergency Security Supplemental Appropriations Act and the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022, and for its keen understanding of our mission and the required resources needed to deliver the services expected by the Congress in the future. Thank you again for this opportunity to appear before you, and I'm pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. We're going to go right into questions, and I will begin and start the process here. As we think about the reopening, all I can think about here is the safety and security. Continuing to hear stories from members on that day, stories from officers on that day, seeing footage from January 6th. So we know that there have been nearly a dozen reports, as you mentioned, offering 104 recommendations by the GAO and various other organizations on needed improvements and reform. So as we move to reopen safely, I just have a couple of questions here. So 42 of the 104 recommendations that I mentioned have been closed. And for those 62 recommendations that are not implemented, how does the fiscal year 23 request address the additional resources or changes needed for the Capitol Police to close those additional recommendations? And can you provide a couple of examples for us of those outstanding recommendations, kind of at the top of your list as to your priorities?
So as we prepared the budget document for the clerks, one of the things that I had my folks do was to, with each individual request, to tie it, if it tied to an Inspector General recommendation, to put that recommendation, list that recommendation that it was tied to. So you'll see many of the requests that we make are tied directly to one of the Inspector General's recommendations. General Honore's report had a number of recommendations as well. We've notated those that are as a result of recommendations from the Honore report. So many, if not most, of the requests we're making come right from those recommendations. Some examples: additional training instructors, specialty equipment for the Civil Disturbance Unit, additional criminal specialists to enhance our data analytics related to member protection, additional mountain bike officers, and an expansion of our K-9 program. These are just some of the examples that some of them involve additional position requests, and again, they're tied directly to the recommendations from the Inspector General.
So the increase in full-time officers, what's the timeline? Can you give us an idea? I know you got to get training, you got to go recruiting. As we mentioned, there's difficulty recruiting cops all over the country. You're in a very unique situation here, competing with Southern Maryland and Northern Virginia. There's all kinds of issues you're dealing with. Give us an idea of your time frame for a ramp up and how this request fits into the ramp up.
So as I mentioned in my initial remarks, we're about halfway through from January 6th to the present. We've made a lot of improvements. We've gotten a lot accomplished. We're about halfway done. I think we're in the midpoint of where we need to be. If we're able to get what we're requesting in the '23 budget, that puts us another lap or two around the track.
What's
and in
that mean?
fact,
Like,
well,
number-wise?
I think we'll be just in broad numbers 3/4 of the way there if we are able to get this done. And so in terms of numbers, right now this budget request would put us around 2,140 officers, sworn officers. Right now we have 1,849 officers, if memory serves. So we're close to 300 below where we need to be. And some of those, now, not all of those, I'm not asking for 300 additional positions because some of those positions are already authorized. We just haven't been able to fill them because we've got behind in attrition, because FLETC being closed for nearly a year for COVID. That has put us behind the 8 ball in terms of our staffing. But we are making progress. I've got about 130 officers in the pipeline in training right now. Some of them are, I just spoke with a group yesterday, a new class yesterday, second day on the job. I just spoke with them yesterday. We've got other folks that are getting ready to graduate the academy. So, but in the pipeline, somewhere in that pipeline, we've got 130 officers in training right now. So this goes to so many of the questions I'm guessing the committee has about reopening and when we'll be ready to be able to staff all staff the CVC and all those sorts of things. We do have a phased reopening plan where we can staff as we can staff these positions. We can get closer back to the way things were pre-COVID. We've already begun. We're making progress already. We'll be able to do more by Memorial Day, more by the end of the year. But it's we're still, and I hope I'm answering your question. I mean, we're still over 300 officers below where we're authorized, and eventually, I think somewhere around between 2,300 and 24 officers is, I think, where we need to be in 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. So I hope that answers your question.
No, that did. What's as far as we read stories and just kind of talking to the officers coming in and out of the buildings, people quitting. I mean, we're seeing this again across the country. How's that? What's the mood? Are people leaving still, or cops leaving still? Are they looking for other work? Are they looking to get out of the profession entirely? How's that affecting the Capitol Police?
Well, as you know, that's a national trend. I would say to you that post-January 6th, we saw our attrition rate double. So clearly there were folks that rethought the job, rethought about whether they wanted to continue to work here, do this job, and more than double, typically about double what we normally see leave for the department through retirements and resignations. We've seen that scale back now. I think the retention bonus that we were able to give through your actions has made a big difference. But the one thing that I've been very pleased is that much like after 9/11, there was no problem from the military or from public safety in terms of recruiting. People wanted to serve their country. And there really has been, the one thing, while we've seen our attrition go up, while we had the issue with FLETC being closed for nearly a year, the fact is that there are still people that want to serve their country by being a Capitol Police officer. We've had more success and not seen the difficulty in recruiting folks to at least come in through the door. Now, look, we still only hire about less than 10% of the people that apply to be Capitol Police officers actually meet our standards. But we have enough people interested in serving that we've not had a problem at least getting the applications to come in. Okay. So my hope is that continues and that we're continue to be able to fill the classes that we've got scheduled so that we can get those staffing numbers up over the next year or two.
Just one quick question here, because my time has expired. But I am the chairman, so I'm gonna take some liberties here. The intelligence issue, that was a key issue on January 6th, where there was a bottleneck in the information that the department had did not make its way down to the rank and file members. Can you talk to us about that issue, and has it been fixed and to your standards?
The short answer to that question is yes. We are making great progress. Through the supplemental, we were able to get a really great jump start in terms of what we needed. This FY23 budget, you'll see additional requests related to intelligence and building up our capability. And again, the supplemental got us halfway there. This budget's going to get us, much further along. And so we have asked for additional positions. We're bringing on board a new director of our intelligence. He comes from the NYPD. He was the director of intelligence analyst and intelligence analysis for the NYPD. Has a great deal of experience in the field, and we're very excited. He begins, I think, in the next week or two, and he certainly has a vision about what he would like to do, and we're trying to make sure that we give him the resources to enact that vision. And so we've got the issues that we had before were gathering, analyzing, sharing, using intelligence, disseminating it among our own staff. Those issues have been fixed. I mean, we are doing a much better job at doing those kinds of things. So there's still more work to be done, because part of making this transformation into a protection agency involves a robust intelligence capacity, not just in an intel unit, but to have intelligence analysts who work for the United States Capitol Police in different task forces, over at the FBI, over at DHS, and in different other divisions within the organization, so that the information is getting disseminated and shared with all the people that need it, and that it becomes part of our operational planning.
Great. We'd probably love to meet him when he gets settled, just kind of
We'll make sure that happens.
meet and greet and hear his vision. Ms. Herrera Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We talked about this in my office. The Capitol has been closed about 2 years now. And a few days ago, Capitol officials unveiled a proposal to reopen the complex. And under the plan, we would still be months away from providing our constituents with full access to their Capitol. And in January, General Walker, and we had this conversation as a committee, or committee members, I believe, cited COVID as kind of the dominant reason, and things looked a little different in January, but the dominant reason the Capitol complex was still closed, while recent reports really talk about the constraints you have in terms of staffing and opening doors and being at the right stations. In either respect, since closing down, the goal of reopening, I think should be another priority. It should be up there with some of these other things we've talked about. How was the decision to implement the phased reopening made, and who gave that direction? And over the last couple of years, given the resources the department has been provided, how has the department been working to address the staffing shortages and security concerns in preparation?
So I will take responsibility. It was my decision to recommend to the leadership of the House that we do a phased reopening, because we don't have the staffing to be at all the posts where we were pre-pandemic. One of the reasons is we have more posts now than we had pre-pandemic because of a number of issues. We are staffing posts that didn't exist 2-3 years ago. So that I appreciate the willingness to and the understanding that we can open limited tours for now. But again, you'll see the CVC open in a limited capacity, hopefully by Memorial Day. by the end of the summer, my hope is we can do a little bit more. So as we have the staffing, we want this facility opened as much as anybody. And I regret that we're the choke point, we're the problem in terms of getting it reopened fully. But I do think everybody's on board that they want to make sure that the safety and security of this campus is what it should be as we reopen. So we have, as I mentioned before, we have multiple training classes in progress. We typically would do 3, 4, 5 a year. We're now doing over 12, and now I think this year we may end up doing 13.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit just to, because we talked a little bit about contracted help to supplement in some of these instances.
Yes.
Not to take over positions, but to help with this process. I have seen reports that say about 3/4 of the contracted security guards can't pass the basic background check. Is that so? Has that delayed the rollout? And how is the department? I mean, I got to believe that there's got to be a security company that's got a better system. How is that being addressed?
So when we first heard that the first group that were having difficulty finding folks that would pass the background check, we decided to contract with additional firms. And we're having much better luck now in getting folks that can pass the background check because we didn't want this to delay things. So if there was a delay, it was a matter of maybe a week or two. But we do have folks that have passed. And when we get them on board, they're going to go through, I believe, about a week of training, and then we'll be able to deploy them in the field. And I do think it's important to reiterate
in non-critical
that this is
positions.
yes,
Yeah,
secondary
yeah,
posts.
yes, yeah.
And this is a temporary solution.
Yeah, I understand that completely, and I think that makes sense, and given the fact that we're over 300 down from where we should be with regard to officers, and that's going to take some time to backfill. Earlier this month, this is a little bit of a transition, GAO released a report raising concerns about officers' training and preparation to respond to violent demonstrations, and that senior leadership needed to, and this is a quote, better understand and address officers' morale issues and concerns with using force. How are you addressing that GAO list, those recommendations?
So it's a training issue, and everyone is getting additional training. We've already started this, and with regard to use of force, the first and foremost, it's legal training because use of force has to be lawful, and so that's a big part of the training. But you add in de-escalation training, emphasis on communication skills. Frankly, if the officers who have the best communication skills in terms of dealing with people usually have the lowest uses of force. But we've got officers trained in cultural competence, duty to intervene. We've got less lethal training and more capacity and more training that is being done for less lethal to better protect our officers. And one of the big things is, especially with civil disturbance and crowd control, is that we are forming teams, CDU platoons that will be teams that work together all the time. So you're working with the same people all the time. They're training together. They're training with other agencies. But so I think all of this is going to help us in terms of dealing with those issues that you described.
Thank you for that. Yield back.
Gentlelady from Connecticut, Ms. Valero.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you for your testimony, and thank you for the really the great work that's been done, since January 6th, and the kind of rigor on the assessments of what we need and what we should be doing going forward, which was certainly, so key to what we did in the supplemental. And now we move on. You did a chat about intelligence, and there is an increased request for intelligence funding in this budget. And you what drives those requests, and what are the new standards for sharing intelligence, assets coordination internally as well as with outside partners? If you could just spend a moment on that.
So I think what's driving it, two things. I mean, one, as we prepare for demonstrations, it's good to have the intelligence that you need to make the proper operational plan. It should the plans that we make should be intelligence driven. They weren't always, and now they are. Obviously the threats that we're getting, not only against members of Congress but against the Capitol itself. That's an important part where we're focusing a lot of energy. I'm sorry, the second part of your question.
Was how are you sharing that
yes.
information? Because that was a very, very big problem.
Yes.
That we
So
on January 6th.
and the part of it, when we do the operational planning, we have an instant action plan, and in there, we make sure that everybody who's got a leadership role, everybody who's in charge of whatever aspect of the plan, we make sure that they know everything about the plan. They don't just know about their little sliver of the pie. They know everything that's going on. We've also issued cell phones to every one of our officers. And so now that information, intelligence information, is delivered every day to all of our personnel. So if we get a report about someone who's they see an individual walking along Independence Avenue and it appears the individual has a gun, that information goes out to in real time, goes out to every one of our officers so that they're aware of this lookout. So it's not only sharing the information with the folks that are doing the operational planning, but it's sharing it with everybody in the organization as well.
And are we sharing with the district police?
Well, that's why we have task force officers in 7 different organizations, including Metropolitan Police and other law enforcement organizations that have an intel component. So yes, we're there with them.
It's great because you know that was a serious issue on
Yes.
January 6th. I've got a couple more questions, but on I guess that GAO report that's been referred to talked about Capitol Police officers wanting more realistic training, and I guess it's a double-edged sword on that with providing that kind of training. What are we doing in terms of that realistic training and the complex, et cetera? And I guess that drives overtime. But tell me, what we're trying to do to address that issue. That in my conversations they talked about realistic training.
Yes, 2 things. One, we're actually training with other agencies. So when we ask for other agencies to come in and help us, we're actually training with them. So we're doing that. In addition, we've now got I think 4 virtual training systems that we're going to have, one at the Capitol, one in our academy, one at the Fairchild Building, and there's another one that I'm sure somebody will whisper it in my ear. But so we have 4 of these machines and that provide amazing training. And it's not just use of force training, it's de-escalation training, it's a host of things that you can do in a virtual atmosphere, which is much more realistic than just sitting in a classroom and hearing about it.
Okay, thank you. Just a final question, if I can. We talked about the 10,000 threats, that more than double the number of threats in 2017. What are we doing, and we hear this from members all of the time on both sides of the aisle, to ensure member safety when they're not in the Capitol, where we do have now, increased protection and support provided by the Capitol Police? Does your budget request account for needs related to the member and staff security in the district?
Yes, we provide, and all you have to do is request it. You can request it through the Sergeant at Arms or just request it directly from us. And we will provide security recommendations. We can do a security assessment of your home offices, make recommendations. We will also coordinate with the local police and sheriff's departments in an individual's home office to ensure that they are aware of the needs. They can be aware of any threats or individuals that we are concerned about. All that information can be shared with local law enforcement, but we will, in fact, do assessment, whether it's a local office, whether it's someone's residence. We provide those services, and we'll be able to do that even better with more capacity, because there is more of a demand now for that kind of service. So this will assist us in making sure that we can achieve or meet the workload, meet the work demand that we have.
Thank you, and I know, and my time has run out, and I know something that the chair has been interested in, and this is member security and their residents. So I'm hopeful that we can continue that conversation and look to see how we can deal with that issue as well. I know it's uppermost on the minds of the of members of Congress, of their family, their security, their family security. So thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. DeLauro. The gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Amadei.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and first of all,
I didn't see you. I was literally thought you were going to pop up on the screen. Sorry.
well, I probably was until I found out that we have all of this new square footage compared to the old days. This is kind of posh, and thank you for your leadership. in
Moving
that
on up.
regard.
We're moving on up.
And Chief, if I was going to be kind of mean, I would use part of my time to ask the chairman if he could pronounce Gus's last name, but since I'll just confess I don't, so he's Gus P., we'll skip from that. I want to thank you for taking some time the other day to come by and talk about your stuff, and I'm not a guy who believes that money is the answer to every issue, but quite frankly, I think I've been here long enough to know that prior to the 6th, we were kind of doing things the way we were and whatever, and it's like, it is obviously time for a change, and I think that's going to require some resources. So thank you for the work you've done to basically on numerous fronts to kind of identify that and where we start and see how that goes. I appreciate that. I also want to highlight for you that since we're doing this and the precipitating factor was January 6th, I would like to encourage you, and I know this isn't all your area, the architect of the Capitol has a piece of it, and the Sergeant at Arms has a piece of it, but when you're looking at how we do a better job, especially on campus, although the thoughts about security for members when they're off campus are pretty poignant, but especially on-campus stuff, it's like, hey, there is some indication just in our routine stuff, it's like, well, that's kind of always the way we did it. And I'm thinking specifically about how you come and go from the buildings that our offices are in is one of those areas that you and I have discussed, to please take a leadership role with your other folks on the board and, say, hey, while we're doing this, and we're looking at technology, and we're looking at, are they staffed appropriately? Do you need sworn officers to do that, or don't you? Obviously, your workforce is an issue, but I have a ton of confidence in the architect's ability, if there are different ways to do things, not to ruin the historical integrity of the facilities, this building, obviously the Capitol, stuff like that, make that stuff blend. And I don't think that we have fully explored that. So I am hoping that you can be a champion as the one of the new guys on the block to revisit that, both in terms of what an appropriately trained workforce needs to be in those areas, who you need in those areas, and oh, by the way, where can we get some benefits for everybody involved with technology so that we avoid things which, we've been doing them that way for a long time. Today's an example. People are coming back to the Capitol and they're in the buildings. And when we talk about security and safety, and I see large groups of people queued outside of buildings, I think for bad people that can represent a target. And it puts your people in danger, and it puts everybody in danger. And so, not that it's, but I just sit there and go, that's been going on for a long time. So it is my hope that as the new chief law enforcement officer on campus, that you can take the opportunity of the reset on this to see if there's a way that we can do these better. And I'll give you one other thing on the record for your colleagues. I know someday we're going to build a visitor center in a parking lot somewhere, but quite frankly, that's unpersuasive when we have so many needs that compete for resources and things like that. So in my mind, to your colleagues on the board, that's not much of an answer. And so, and maybe it isn't, whatever, but I would just encourage you to be a leader in that. And we'll look forward to getting with you offline and working through any other issues, and if we have any other questions. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman, the distinguished gentlelady from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chief Manger, thank you for joining us. And really, I share in the gratitude my colleagues have expressed for the work of the Capitol Police. And I think your word was appropriate. The circumstances and challenges are relentless, and you meet them with hard work and dedication, and we could not function without you. So we are very, very grateful. I was going to ask you about recruitment. I am delighted to hear that that is one problem you don't seem to be having. And I wondered if you are participating in any particular programs or associating with groups to help diversity within the hiring.
Yes. First of all, we have contracted with a search firm that is helping us recruit, because I don't want to take any chances. I want to make sure that that's not that doesn't become an issue for us. But more importantly, we're very pleased to have hired a chief diversity officer that came on board about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Vilma Alejandro has already hit the ground running and is ensuring that that our hiring practices, recruitment practices are exactly where they need to be. And so I'm very pleased with the work that she's done already, and have high hopes that she's going to make a real impact for us.
That's great, thank you. And I know we had talked previously about some of the new vetting and background programs that you were putting in place. And I know some of this is under the Sergeant of Arms. Can you give me a little update on where we are in that process?
So now, is that with regard to?
For the officers, I know we had talked about before making sure that our officers are safe and that there are background checks
Yes.
going into the Capitol Police you're looking to hire.
Yes. We have very high standards that we maintain, which is one of the reasons that we have to get so many people through the door to apply, because we're very selective. One of the things that we're doing differently than we did years ago was to doing a deep dive in someone's social media, because you can learn a lot about a person, and if there are issues by looking at some of that information. We used to just send
I
people.
remind my children of this
Yes.
daily.
We used to send people we knocked on the neighbor's door and said, do you know, this individual, they've applied to become a Capitol Police officer, what do you think? And you get the neighbors, would say, oh yeah, seems like a nice kid or whatever. But this, I think, is a better way to, in fact, do the vetting that we need to do to make sure that we have somebody who has the integrity, the character, and frankly, the character traits that we're looking for that we believe makes a good police officer.
Thank you. What steps are you taking to either expand or build on the wraparound support services that you put in place for officers after January 6th?
I appreciate you asking me that question, because this is tremendously important. Two goals that we have in mind. One is we want to focus on helping employees cope with just the daily stress of life, the daily stress of being a police officer. But we also want to provide services to our employees that have been through a crisis, been through a traumatic event, and provide that treatment and because they've been through a traumatic incident, to help build their resiliency. So those are the two things that we're trying to accomplish. We're doing it in a number of ways. One, we've contracted with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and that we have a number of folks going through that program now. And in fact, I appreciate the FOP Chairman, Gus Papathanassiou, for he is going through with a number of his shop stewards to really give us a good evaluation of the program, and so I appreciate that. We've also are standing up our own health and wellness center, and we've named that after Officer Howard Liebengood, who we lost just after January 6th. It's a center for wellness. It will include employee assistance, health, nutrition, fitness, trauma-informed care specialists, peer support, building resiliency and work-life balance, a support dog program. That's probably the most popular thing is the support dog. 3 fitness centers, a chaplain program. So the Lieben Good Center will, we're working closely with Howie's wife in terms of the opening. We're in the process of hiring a director for that center, and Mrs. Lieben Good would like us to get that person on board before we make the formal opening. That we're actually already providing the services. We just haven't done the formal opening of the Lieben Good Center. That should be coming very soon, but we want to get the director on board for that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. The distinguished gentleman from Hawaii, Mr. Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I wanted to follow up on the chair's questions along the lines of recruitment and retention, because I think the basic question is whether you are getting to where you need to be on your staffing, and whether you have the funding in this budget or others to get there. And I don't want there to be a artificial limitation on your requests along those lines. I just want to understand exactly what the situation is so we can determine, whether the funding is adequate. So you said earlier, I just make a couple of comments. You said earlier you need about 1,849 officers.
And that's what we have now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yes. I'm sorry. 1,849 now, 300 short of where you think you need to be. And where you think you need to be is based on all of the reports, all of the, post-January 6th analysis. You think you need to be 300 more than what you have today?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said you have 130 officers in the pipeline, which obviously means you have a number of officers that are not in the pipeline. And, you although you feel comfortable on the recruitment side of things, that obviously depends on your attrition rate as well. And you said your attrition was lower than it was or than you expected, but what actually is it? And the question I'm asking is, how's this pipeline working? How fast is it going? Is the pipeline producing an increase in officers or a reduction, and on what time frame?
That's a good question. Our typical attrition, now I'm not, let's remove the year January 6th and the following year, because it was double what normally was. Normally, 75 to 80 people will leave the department each year, either because they're retiring, because they resign, a couple get fired, but between 75 and 80 a year will leave. So what we're trying to do is to increase the number of folks that we're hiring, more than what we used to in a typical year. Again, in a typical year, we hired 120 people or so. Now we're looking to hire well over 200 people. We could get up high as 280, but certainly over 200 people a year. This gets us ahead of attrition. And I think our attrition is going to start going back to normal because of the things that were in the supplemental, the hazard pay, the specialty pay, the retention bonus. Those are things that I think are keeping officers here. So I believe at this point we are in fact getting ahead of attrition, but we've got a ways to go before we get up to where we need to be.
Okay, so I'm just breaking that down. So you're losing, in a normal year, you said about 70.
75 to 80, yes.
And is that, are you ahead of that, behind that? Where are you right now, this last year, just to take a snapshot?
If you take the past, see, last year, the year from January 6th, 2001 to January 6th, 2022, I'm sorry, 2021 to 2022, we lost 140, 150 people. So that was not a normal year.
All right.
This year, I believe we are beginning to get ahead of attrition. And I think that my hope is that with everything we've put into place, with everything that we've been able to put into place because of the decisions by this subcommittee, we will be able to get ahead of attrition. I think we've slowed it down back to normal, and we've increased the hiring. So that
Are you ahead of attrition today, or
today?
Do you hope
Yes.
to get ahead of it?
No, I believe we are right today. If I look at beginning of this fiscal year, we are ahead of attrition.
Okay. I guess then the question is, how far ahead are you, and how fast then? What's that rate, and how quickly does that get you to full complement of officers? And do you have the resources you need to successfully compete on both the recruitment and the retention side, even though you're better on both recruitment and retention, is that enough? Because if I'm looking at the budget numbers, I mean, basically, you're asking for a 17.5% increase over FY 2022, right? So that's pretty recent, and we plussed up there. But only of that 17%, the rate at salaries and benefits is 11%. So you're allocating more of that increase to non-salaries and benefits, which may well be what we need to do. But then I question, well, are we doing enough on the salaries and benefits side to get to your full complement? And if you look at it over 2 years, we've seen about 23% FY21 actual to your proposed increase for salaries and benefits, 40% overall. So the trend on both sides is that the increases are going more to non-salaries and benefits than the salaries and benefits. And to the ranking member's question, you recommended a phased opening because of shortages in the force. And so it's just an open question in my mind, like, are we doing enough to get you to a full complement fast enough to achieve everything we want?
So I'm trying to keep, you've got 4 questions that you've asked me. We are getting ahead of it. I said we're ahead of attrition. We're getting ahead of attrition this year. It's still early. We have put more people in the pipeline than we've lost. So that's where I base my decision. We're getting ahead of attrition. One of the problems that caused the folks to leave here, is the fact that we were burning our officers out. We didn't have enough cops. And we're holding them over constantly, canceling days off, forcing them to work overtime. Look, I've been a cop for 43 years. Cops like overtime, but they also like to know that they're going to have a day off once in a while, like to spend time with their families. And we were burning them out because we were so short, and the demands had increased so exponentially and so. When you see that much of our percentage of increase is not related to salaries and benefits and that sort of thing, it's because we got to get more people. That's the only way I'm going to solve, or one of the big ways I'm going to solve the attrition problem, because cops here think, look, we didn't have enough people. When things go bad, all it means is I don't get a day off. My day's off. I got to work over. I got to work double shifts. And again, they like that to a certain level, but then it gets to a point where they're burnt out. And so we've got to get more people so that we can manage that, manage the overtime and make sure we have enough people when we have a big event that they feel confident, okay, we got enough people and, and the event's going to go okay. So I'm trying to work on both things at the same time. And do I think it's going to take us a couple of years. It could, and I hope it's just a couple of years to get us where we need to be. Because it takes so long to hire, to recruit, hire, and train somebody to the point where you can actually send them out on their own. A training process is the better part of a year. So all this takes a while, but that's why we're doing all these things simultaneously.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Case. The gentlelady from Virginia, Ms. Wexton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and thank you, Chief Manger, for joining us here today. It's great to see you. I grew up in the D.C. metro area, and so I feel like I've seen you on my TV for like 20, 30 years now, and it's good to have you here in the Capitol Police.
Thank you for saying I didn't speak to your kindergarten class, because I've had that happen before too. So.
No, and I appreciate your coming out of retirement to help us here, and I think that you're doing a great job of setting the department up for the next level. What we're facing in today's world. So I want to thank you for that, and I also want to thank you for talking about Howie Liebengood, who was my constituent, and about the center that's opening. I'm overjoyed that those resources were included in the security supplemental, and that your guys are taking it seriously and really working to make that happen. But you probably saw in the news that the DC Police and Firefighters Retirement and Relief Board declared Jeffrey Smith's death to be a line of duty death. You did see that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's my understanding that Serena Liebengood and his family are seeking a line of duty death designation with DOJ for Howie. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. In fact, we helped her with the paperwork.
Okay, very good. And has the Capitol Police taken a position on what DOJ should do with that?
Not yet.
Okay. Do you anticipate that you will?
When the time comes that it's appropriate to do so, we will.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you what that position will be, but I certainly hope that you guys do the right thing for the Lieben Good family, because for them, it's really not about money, it's not about stuff, it's about the acknowledgement that Howie would still be with us were he not defending the Capitol on January 6th. So I hope that you'll do the right thing for him. Now, following up on Mr. Case's questions about training and about making sure that we have the officers in the pipeline. You had told me in our phone conversation that I think you said that there are 13 classes at FLETC right now, or that?
Not right now.
That are over the
We'll
past-
have
the next
13
year.
classes throughout this fiscal year, yes.
Okay, that's an awful lot to be graduating from FLETC. Do you anticipate that they can keep up that pace of training classes, like until we get to where we need to be?
Yes, our training folks have ensured that we have the seats available that we need.
Okay, very good. Now, back to the Howie Lieben Good Center. Do you have any, and believe me, I've represented a jurisdiction that's going to be getting phase 2 of the Silver Line of Metro here for a long enough time that I know that people don't like to give me dates that things are going to open, but do you have some anticipation of when the center, the bricks and mortar center, will open?
Yeah, soon. I mean, it's there. Actually, the offices are the suite of offices that will be the center are operating already. We just talking to Mrs. Liebengood, we're working with her, and her wish. I hope I'm speaking correct, saying this accurately, but she wants it to be when we do the ribbon cutting. She wants it to be everything in place, including the director, and we're in the process of hiring one now. So my hope is that we're talking about weeks and not months. It's soon, I hope.
Very good.
That's our intention.
Thank you, thank you. And what's being done to inform the police department, to inform the officers about what resources are available and encourage them to take advantage of them?
Here are 39 bulletins that we put out. We put out electronically, and we post for our officers. All 39 of these bulletins over the past year have to do with wellness, health and wellness initiatives that the department is making available to our officers. So 39 bulletins that we put out over the past year, making sure folks know what we have available.
Very good. And encouraging them to partake of these services.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
imagine as well. Very good. Now, a couple of the members here asked about the trainings that you have and the fact that this GAO report indicated that a lot of officers didn't feel like they were particularly well trained in certain areas, in particular with regard to crowd control, I guess. And it's my understanding you had said that you guys had enhanced the training for crowd control, but that was mainly concentrated in the civil disturbance CDU.
Correct.
Was that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What steps are being taken to ensure that other officers are getting the training that they need
So
in crowd control?
everyone gets what we call crowd management training. And that the civil disturbance folks get, when folks are crossing the line in terms of their demonstration activity, where they've crossed the line, that they're doing something against the law. But crowd management training is being given to all of our officers.
Okay, very good. And are you able to use that immersive artificial intelligence system that you have in order to give that crowd control training?
Yeah,
So
I mean,
that
that's this is a very this has great capabilities. So yes, I think that's being able to, because you stand in front of a screen where you're talking to different people, and depending on what happens or your response, they can change the scenario or change the response of the person you're dealing with. So it's very realistic training, and you can do it in just dozens and dozens of settings.
Very good. I see my time has expired, so I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Wexton. Next, in batting cleanup for the committee is the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Espaillat.
I thought I was a closer, Mariano Rivera. But okay. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for your efforts to make us safer here. Many experts have asserted that a potential second attack, God forbid, against the Capitol will be different than the first one, just like an angry racist mob. In fact, the April 2nd attack that led to the death of Officer William Evans was a different one. And we sort of couldn't prevent that from happening. And so, and I see that given what's happening in Ukraine and the fear of cyber attacks against our country, I see that you've included in your budget of $5 million to address threats and expand cybersecurity capabilities of your department. How safe are we in that department, if you may, from cyber attacks? And what does the $5 million do? That's the first question. The second question is that the K-9 unit has been increased or has been included in the budget. We calls over $2.5 million to expand their capability, and we know that two of our, both the DNC and the RNC were in clear danger as pipe bombs were placed near them, just like a block away from here. And how much does that increase sweeps, and what does that mean in terms of security?
So I'll answer the K-9 question first. We have increased the number of sweeps that we do daily. In fact, multiple times a day that we're doing sweeps, and we've increased the locations where we do them.
By how much?
I'll have to get back to you with that, but I know it's significantly. And one of the things we want to do is to be able to sustain that and be able to do all the locations. You know, we can't just focus on the Capitol without focusing on the office buildings as well. And we got the Library of Congress and the Botanical Gardens. So we want to make sure that we're giving everybody good service in terms of the multiple sweeps a day. With regard to the cyber, how safe are we? I will tell you that if I get briefings from the FBI fairly regularly, and that's one of the biggest concerns that the FBI has is cyber attacks, and that has increased in the past month. And I always feel like we're staying one step ahead of the bad guy, and occasionally the bad guy, you know, it does something that we didn't anticipate. So much of the effort is focused on ensuring education for everybody that works in this complex to be able to identify an attack, and then also a fair amount of technology is being used to prevent attacks that we know about or that we've seen around the world. So that's basically where we're focusing our efforts.
And how could you work, or is it necessary for the Capitol Police to work with our staff, with our teams, to ensure that my database is untouched and protected?
Right, and that's a team effort between the Sergeant at Arms offices and the Capitol Police. But again, it's we get the real experts, and I guess the best information we get typically is from Homeland Security and the FBI. But what we need to do is make sure that we, especially if there's specific information that people can take precautions or be aware of specific attacks, we got to make sure that we get that out to all the employees, the staff, everybody on the campus.
And just, Mr. Chairman, before my time is up, I just want to share with you that I still have this gut feeling, eerie feeling when I walk out of the Capitol, when I walk down the steps of the Capitol after voting, that we're just still wide open and susceptible to an attack. Yes.
Can I react to that, if I might? Because you're not alone in that sense. And I think it'll take some time. But one of the things that we would like to do, the Capitol Police want to do, is restore that sense of safety that people had on this campus. I mean, look, you could have a lone actor do something anywhere in our country. But for many, many years, this was people did have a better sense of safety on this campus than they have today. And it'll take some time, but my intention is to restore that sense of safety that people have.
I just mean that because when I'm walking around the campus, I see runners coming through, I see people walking through, like they just get right in, and I just think we're wide open. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Espaillat. Chief, thank you. A lot of kudos to the men and women who served here on January 6th, and I just wanted to note that there will be a plaque hanging in the west front of the U.S. Capitol honoring the officers and agencies that were there that day protecting us, and Ms. Herrera-Butler was a big part of making that happen, and it was a bipartisan effort. But I think it's important that we honor the people who were there that day, showing tremendous amount of courage. And I just want to say, I mean, I'm really proud of the committee here because you saw the scope and the depth of questioning on all these issues that are just critically important. And, you know, we want you to know that you and your relationship with Gus and the union is really important, and your relationship with us is very important as the appropriators. And we recognize the significant lift here to try to get us where we need to be. And I think when you're talking about training and getting officers onboarded, and it's like, yeah, there's no magic wand here that we could just wave and all of a sudden there's 300 new officers. This is clearly a process. And, you know, we want you to know that we're partners with you in this. We appreciate your leadership. These are very difficult times, and we have to be united as we move forward to try to do this. And that, you know, the American people want to get back here. You know, the schools want to get back here. The tourists want to get back here. And I think it's, given everything going on in the world, I think we got to do everything we can to make sure people can come and be reminded of, you know, how important America is and how important this Capitol is. So we can't thank you enough. I appreciate your focus, as you know, on the wellness piece, and I'm really glad to see that this is moving forward in such a significant way. You know, the trauma, just life in general, let alone you're a cop, and let alone you're a cop in the U.S. Capitol and a cop that had to kind of work through January 6th. So we want to make sure that part of the retention is that, you know, we care about how people feel and the traumas that they're dealing with. So I appreciate you giving that some effort. We do want to, I think, at some point connect you with the House Wellness Program, and Brian Weiss is doing a great job, and we've been standing that up through this committee the last few years. And basically it's, you know, and I think you're moving in that direction too, it's almost like a buffet of services, you know, from financial to nutrition to diet to the different practices and techniques that people can use to really deal with the trauma, and just kind of, you know, life's crazy now for everybody. So we appreciate you doing that, and that's of significant interest to this committee. So we appreciate everything that you're doing. Please, you know, say thanks to your team that we appreciate it, and we're going to look very closely. I'm sorry. I yield unlimited amount of time to my
so sorry.
partner here.
I agree with so much of what the chairman said, and I just want to echo and ditto those statements, except for I can't say Gus's last name. I did want to mention on the plaque, it's a very small thing, but my hope is that years and years from now, when tours come through this Capitol, that will be a stop on those tours. And what the children of tomorrow are told was, that was one of the many dark days in our nation's history, and we overcame, and here are the men and women who made sure those people failed. And I know we're years from that, but that is something I believe will happen, and I'm very excited that the names of the officers are on there, because they really did, I think, we'll never know fully their sacrifice, and those around the Capitol as well. But that's more to me a symbol of the failure of those who are against democracy. So thank you for that.
I don't know if you have any.
No, thank you all.
Go to the order.
I appreciate all your kind words, and I will pass them along to my officers.
Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Till next time. Hearing is adjourned.